Hey, brother. I hope you're doing all right. I thought it would be interesting to try and use this software. Um, Man, that's right. To show you kind of just what it looks like to go through a passage. So it's basically this is my copy of Logos. If you're not familiar with it, it's like a Bible study software. Way back in the day, I worked for a church, and one of the nicer things that came out of that whole event was I got a very expensive piece of software that still updates, and they moved to a software as a service model, which is awesome. And so I have this giant, like, $1,000 library that I still have access to, which is great. So this is Logos. This is the Septuagint that I've been going through. So it's the Greek version of the Old Testament. It is, well, it is not the Masoretic text, which is, what you would most likely learn in seminary and things like that. It is the text that is quoted in the New Testament. So whenever you're reading the New Testament and you see quotes of the Old Testament, obviously there's not Hebrew mixed in with that Greek. There is Greek from the Septuagint. So we're looking at Psalm 1 here, and I've kind of got my own little setup. I parse the words kind of piece by piece by parsing it to like figure out what the word is grammatically. And so let's kind of go line by line. See, can't turn this into something. So, and you'll hear my kids in the background there. So this is, let me read the first little clause here. So we've got Makarios Enea. So Makarios is the traditional word for blessing or happiness. And honestly, there's nothing too kind of fancy if we were to go over here to BDAG. BDAG is like the resource when it comes to looking up words. So if you look at like a lot of the uses, privileged, blessed, favored, fortunate, happy, that's really not too controversial of a word. There's tons and tons of uses of it. And we could go into like this huge like how different passages use it in a different way, but really like the etymology of the word doesn't change that much. It means blessing. So one of the things you can do, which we're not going to do here, is go through and find the reference to Psalm 1 in this work, and that's the lexicon's way of saying like this is what we think your passage, and what this BDAG looks at all of the major church fathers, Old Testament, New Testament, like every use and like collects it into one. Kind of tries to label where everything is. And then the next word we have here is aner. So aner is like the traditional word for man. It is not the word that's used for mankind, which would be like anthropos, but it is the word for like a husband or a man, and it almost always means those two things. So if we were to look this word up in BDAG and go here, ultimately these two words, an adult human male, man, husband. When you This is like if you hear the vocative, which is like man, do something. This is like the word that's most often used, as opposed to mankind or men are this way when they're speaking of like people in general. So this one's pretty straightforward. You have an adjective and a noun. They're both in the nominative case, which because there's no, it's not worth going into the grammar fully, but this is translated, blessed is the man. Things around that. And my kids are running around in the background. All right, so that's that first clause in Psalm 1:1. So next we have has, which is who. Very straightforward. It is in the nominative case, and what the nominative case just means is like that is going to be the subject. And then uk, a peruthe. So one of the interesting things about a peruthe is that it's passive, and I'm still confused on this, and ironically, there's not a lot of, it's tough to find like any texts that are specifically on the Septuagint, which is why most people don't jump straight into it. Most commentaries look at the Masoretic text, so you'll get all this commentary on how the Hebrew is written out, but there's a lot of confusion. So what this means that it's a passive verb is an active verb would be Jim threw the ball, like I'm the one performing the action, but if it's passive, the action happens at me, and this is passive. So it's the verb to walk, and it almost makes it sound like the walking is happening to the person. So we've got our subject, which is who, and maybe there's something there with the who, but it's really interesting what's going on there. So the one who is not walked is almost how I would like translate that really rigidly. Like I said, I'd expect an active verb here, not a passive. So the one who is not walked, and then we have a participial phrase right here, which is in the council of the ungodly. So boule is counsel. I think a lot of passages, if we go over here to text comparison, I think a lot of passages, okay, here's the counsel, do not walk in the counsel, do not in the advice, are not in step with the NIV. But this is the whole word for counsel, and it's actually used at the end of this psalm. So if you go to 1:6, you will see, maybe it's 1:5. Here it is, boule, the counsel of the righteous right there. So it is used again for a positive sense, but we have, and then asabon, which honestly, asabon is a word that I wasn't super familiar with. If we go to BDAG, it says that it means ungodly or profane or things along that way. Obviously, a direct ungodly would be atheist, where we get that from. But sebase is a word that I'm not familiar with. The alpha on the front is how we say an antithesis of. So, if we're looking at kind of how this word is used here, it gives you a common, but it really means to, the violation of norms or proper relation to a deity, irreverent, impious, ungodly. And really, this is one that I'm sure it's in the scriptures a ton. Like you see it 2 Peter, Romans, 2 Peter. These are all bad. It looks like Paul likes it in Romans, but it is, here we go. In these particular, it is the ungodly who are already condemned, punished, eternal fire, some of the words that go with it. But so if we were to go with this first clause, we have, blessed is the man who is not walked in the way of the ungodly, and that's my children. And in let me read this. Shh. Kai, there we go. Kai en audo e martelon uk este. So, and here we have the phrase, and in the road or the way of sinners. So what we have here is, and is your classic prepositional phrase. So, and means in Greek. Super easy and convenient. Audo is what's called a dative. It's usually used for an indirect object. So you can see I've got a blue here. We have the same sort of prepositional phrase here with boule, which means in a council and in a way of sinners. So there's no definite article. So you really should translate this as a way. My children are making a mess next to me. So if we were to translate this fully, we've got blessed is the man who is not walked in the way of the ungodly, and in the way of sinners does not stand. So here's what's interesting to me, right? If I look at this verb here, this one's active. So it's interesting that walking was passive, and I don't know why it's passive, because the verb it doesn't seem to be happening. It's weird to say somebody was walked. Like I walk. I'm not walked. I walk my dog. My dog is walked. That's a passive verb, but it seems odd here. But here we have a martelon. A martelos is like the word for sin. That's your classic word for sin. This is plural and genitive, so it means it shows ownership usually. So this is the road of sinners. Also odos, and in this case it's parsed as odo. That's like the word for way. I am the way, the truth, and the life. That's the same word, odos. So, and here we have the odos of sinners, but Jesus gives us I guess you could say the odos Iesu, the way of Jesus. So here we have iste. This comes from the word istemi. It is past tense. That's why it's red there. Isaac, you gotta stop, buddy. Okay, no more. I'm done. All right. Yes, sir. Okay. So here we have istemi, which is to stand. Obviously, Greek does word order really isn't that important in Greek. There's a few things that have to be in order, but for the most part, not so much. So Once again, to translate this whole thing, blessed is the man who is not walked in the way of the counsel of the ungodly, and in the way of sinners does not stand. And then finally, we have this last phrase here. So what we have here is Kai. Kai is like 5% of the entire Bible. It just means and. Nothing fancy there. But the rest of the phrase is Kai epi kathadron loimon uk eketharesen. So what we have here is a prepositional phrase, which means upon the seat. And then this is a genitive, which is, this is the big word I gave you that has a real interesting background. So if we go here and we look at BDAG, this is the one where I was like, I know this word is pestilence, and so I'm super confused, because this is the first entry that pops up. But then if we look, and it says here that really, this is only used in this way in the Septuagint, but it means to be diseased, pestilent, but specifically a public enemy, somebody who is a menace to society. So does not sit upon, and here we go, and we have the word for seat. In this way, it is akathesen, and it comes from the word kathizo, which is to sit down. This one's not too complicated. I mean, a lot of these like straightforward motion verbs are really easy. So hopefully you found this helpful. If I were to do a really quick interlinear, blessed is the man who is not walked in the counsel of the ungodly, and is not standing, did not stand in the way of sinners, and upon the seat of the public enemies does not sit. One of the things about the past tense in Greek, at least these specific types of past tense, is that it gives the idea of instantaneously happening. So there's the idea that, to sit is an instantaneous action, which is like versus like they were sitting, or something was like occurring. But all of these things, they did not walk, they did not stand, and they did not sit, and that's called the aorist tense. So everything occurred in the past, but it occurred instantly, and it generally doesn't have ongoing effects. So hope this was helpful. I'll figure out a better format with more structure, and we'll go from there. Have a good one, brother. Blessings.